Holy Cross, Catholic, all male, more than 2,000 white students, 27 black students, many of them as frustrated as Clarence was.
No, I was pissed off. I had evolved from being hopeful to being pissed off. A lot of young people in America was pissed off, and they weren't seeking a reconciliation, okay? They're seeking a coup. Change the whole thing.
I want to talk about Black Panthers and how one of them became a Supreme Court justice.
He definitely was inspired by the Black Panthers. He dressed like them, he talked like them. He had a beret, he had army fatigues, and he had the army boots.
There was one law professor, Ralph Winter, who, in a challenging way, mentioned this. People don't think, you deserve to be here, that kind of thing. And Thomas doesn't take it as a challenge, he takes it as a slight.
Rather than try to fit in, Thomas tried to stand out.
He dressed in overalls and a t-shirt. It was kind of a uniform. Neither one of us was terribly rich, so I didn't wear overalls, but I understood what it meant for him.
With Clarence Thomas, what you see is somebody who's isolating himself.
The reality is, it was all bullshit. Clarence Thomas was never a Black Panther. Clarence Thomas just wanted to get his name out there. He wanted to be just different enough so that he got noticed.
He wore an afro. He was out there with everyone else. I think it was positive because he had a group. He wasn't alone now. He became part of his group.
I don't know if he had a well-formed political philosophy before he got the Holy Cross. Maybe he was simply going along. But the years, 1968, 1969, the throwing off of oppression by any means necessary, it was very seductive, it was very compelling to many, many people, among whom was Clarence Thomas.
After Holy Cross, Clarence Thomas was off to a very different world once again, Yale Law School.
All you got to say is, man, I'm a Yale alum, and bam, you got a job. That was our perception.
His classmate, John Bolton, would become UN ambassador, Undersecretary of State, and National Security Advisor.
And we started talking and talked for the next 2 years, basically, and that's where we got to know each other.
Over time, Thomas would open up to Bolton.
I don't think he was terribly happy at the law school. Look, people at Yale Law School, generically speaking, are a pretty arrogant group. They think that they're going to rule the world. For example, in the year ahead of us were Bill and Hillary Clinton.
And there are other black students there, but again, the black students who are there, he doesn't feel they are like him. He's not part of the elite.
My father used to say that politics is not a straight line. It's not like the right is here and the left is here. It's actually a circle. Because if you go far enough left and far enough right, you come back to the same place. Go figure.
And he had a hero, Malcolm X.
We want freedom by any means necessary. We want justice by any means necessary. We want equality by any means necessary.
He had a poster of Malcolm X in his dorm room.
Justice Thomas boasted at one point he had read all of his speeches. And he said at one time he could quote you some of them by heart. So he really did pay attention to Malcolm X.
Clarence Thomas is just full of shit. And he will say anything he needs to get his name on the board.
We are oppressed. We are exploited. We are downtrodden. We are denied not only civil rights, but even human rights.
Clarence Thomas's activism culminated in his junior year.
4,000 students against 2,000 police.
The police fired rounds of tear gas into the crowd. But that didn't deter us. And we kept on rioting well into the night. I got back to campus at 4 in the morning, horrified by what I'd just done.
All over the United States yesterday, there were anti-war protests, most of them peaceful. One was not at Harvard University last night.
I had let myself be swept up by an angry mob for no good reason other than that I too was angry.
It's certainly something he talks about a lot. Here I am in Harvard Square and like this mini riot. Like, what am I doing here, right? What am I doing?
He was conflicted about what he'd done, who he was, what he stood for.
And of course, any suggestion that he's not offered exactly the same as all of his contemporaries must be because he's being held back because of affirmative action.
He said he would keep stacks of rejection letters he had gotten from law firms. Even when he was like a Supreme Court justice, he had these letters just to sort of remind him of those, again, this feeling of rejection by kind of the elite law firms.
He had his Yale law degree, and he had a 10-cent stamp stuck to it. You know, like a 10-cent price tag stuck to it. Because he's like, yeah, this is what it's worth, right? 10 cents, right? No more.
He came to blame affirmative action for the rejection he felt.
Now I knew what a law degree from Yale was worth when it bore the taint of racial preference. I was humiliated and desperate.
How exactly does that work? Affirmative action kept him from getting a job. Wow, that's quite a slide.
He assumed that others were assuming that it's a Yale law degree, but with an asterisk next to it.
I disagree. I disagree totally.
Orion Douglas had a strikingly similar academic journey to Clarence Thomas's. Scholarship to Holy Cross, law school, eventually becoming a judge.
I ain't gonna blame affirmative action for not getting a job when you never was offered the job for 100 years before, okay? The system was still there. The infrastructure for separation, discrimination was still there. It was still the segregated mindset of white America.
And then, of course, Clarence Thomas discovered the Heritage Foundation because they were wall-to-wall white people. In this case, he needed affirmative action. And the Heritage Foundation needed themselves a black man. And nobody is quicker to sell a black man than Clarence Thomas.
I don't think anything about Clarence Thomas is simple. I mean, he's a bundle of contradictions, and it seems like there's just always so much inner tension within him. Yes, he was radical like his peers, but not as radical.
So a former Black Panther would later vote to repeal the Voting Rights Act.
And he broke with them in various ways. And he's always breaking with whatever the dominant political trope is. He says, you know, he's always talking about how he's not going to do what's fashionable. He wants to be different.
A former Black Panther fucking wannabe would later vote to repeal the Civil Rights Act.
And he's kind of saying, you know, I don't want to try to join you, maybe because he doesn't want to be rejected again.
After 3 years of Yale Law School, graduation was nearing. But Clarence Thomas wasn't getting the offers he expected from prestigious law firms.
He was saying that he wasn't getting the kind of offers that other students were getting.
This motherfucker wants to repeal gay marriage. He's already repealed abortion.
And we couldn't understand it. We thought that, well, you know, you're at Yale, and if you're not getting offers, something's wrong, you know, because that's the whole purpose of going to those schools.
Thomas would never forget the sting of those rejections.
He wasn't a Black Panther. He was a typical Republican, scared little pussycat who couldn't explain why he wasn't liked. Could it possibly be because you're an asshole? I'm Zachariah, Lone Star Liberal. Y'all take it easy.